The FBI had an operation going in Milwaukee, undercover operation, against the Milwaukee family, right? The Balistreri family, who's connected to Chicago. Now, this will give you a little hint how the mob works. So they're not really going anywhere. All right, they had a vending machine company set up, and the undercover was actually that I knew, which is because I had a rule: if I didn't know you, I don't care if you're an FBI agent or not, I'm not introducing you. I'm not vouching for you because I don't know if you're any fucking good or not.
Right.
You know. So they reach out to me and they say, "Hey, we got an operation going in Milwaukee." Yeah, and this is what it is. We got a vending machine company. We got trucks. We got a warehouse. We got machines, but we're not getting anywhere. You know, the undercover. Who's the undercover? Ty Cobb. That was his. Yeah, that was the agent's real name. I said, Ty's the undercover. They said, yeah. I said, okay, now I'll listen to you. Because I know Ty and I had done undercover work in Chicago together. I said, okay. So I'm talking, I said, well, tell Ty to call me. I want to talk to Ty. So he said, he tells me what's going on. He said, I'm going to all these bars and restaurants, and they won't take my machines because the mob it's all the mob's machines. I said, all right. So I said, well, what's the plan? Well, maybe you can bring the Bonannos out here, and we can get a sit down with the Balistreris. I said, well, let me see. So I'm with Ruggiero one day, and I dropped hey, left. I got a call the other day from a guy that I used to steal artwork with down in Baltimore. And he's out in Milwaukee. He said, what the fuck's he doing in Milwaukee? I said, he's got a vending machine company, and he wants me to come out and help him. He says, is he crazy? He said, they'll blow him up out there. He says, he can't do a vending machine business out there. That's the mob. I said, well, he doesn't know. He doesn't know anything about the mob. And we drop it. A couple of days later, I says, I left this guy call me again. He needs help. He said, Donnie, what do you think? He said, you can't just go out there. And then he looks at me, he said, this guy got any money? I said, I don't know, let me ask him. I said, I'll call him tonight and find out if he's got any money. So I called Ty. He was going by name of Tony. And I said, hey, Tony. I said, Lefty wants to know if you got any money. He said, all right. He said, tell him I got $200,000 in the bank. And, I got a warehouse full of machines. I got everything set up. That's okay. So I go back to Lefty. I said, Left, he's told me he's got $200,000 in the bank. And he's got this big warehouse set up. He says, all right. He said, let me talk to Mike. Now, Mike Sabello's the captain, right? So Mike said, all right. He said, you and Lefty go out there. Just sit down with him and make sure that he has what he says he has. Don't tell anybody you're going. I said, okay. So the first thing is call Tony and tell him to send us airplane tickets. Because, wise guys, they're not spending their own money. So the Bureau, Tony gets us 2 plane tickets. Me and Lefty fly out there. And he takes us to the warehouse, and they got the whole operation going on. And Lefty said, okay, so we go back and report back to Mike. And he said, okay, he says, now here's the story. Tony's been with the Bonannos for 10 years. He's been an associate of ours for 10 years because that's what he has to tell Chicago and Milwaukee. Because if they just say, Donnie just met this guy, they're going to say, well, he's not with you. You didn't claim him. So we'll take the whole business.
Right.
So here's the way it works. Now we go to our consigliere, the consigliere of the Bonannos, right? A guy by the name of Bobby Badhart. You know why they called him Bobby Badhart?
Because he had a bad heart.
Had a bad heart. Easy, right? So he goes, and Bobby Badhart now has to call Chicago, right? And tell Chicago that, hey, we got a guy that's been with us for 10 years. He's settled now in Milwaukee. He's been in Milwaukee for a couple years. And he wants to go into the business, and he has machines and everything. And we'd like to have a sit-down with Balistreri, the boss of Milwaukee. Okay. Chicago now calls Balistreri's consigliere and relates the whole story to him. So now we got to wait and see if he wants to have the sit-down. A week or so goes by, Chicago calls back and said, okay, he'll have a meet with you guys. Who's coming out? Well, it'd be Lefty Ruggiero and Donnie Brasco. Now, Lefty's a made guy, so, you know. So they say, okay, come on out, check into this hotel and wait for a phone call. All right, so me and Lefty fly out, check into this hotel, and we wait about 3 or 4 days, just hanging around the hotel. We can't go anywhere because we can't miss the phone call. So we get the phone call. He says, okay, come to Snug's restaurant. Such and such a day, such and such a time. It's Balistreri's restaurant. He owns a hotel, and it's a restaurant in his hotel. So me, Lefty, and Tony, the other undercover, we go there. And now, if you know the mob, Joe, you don't get to sit down with a boss unless you're another boss. You know what I mean? Made guys that are just made guys in other families don't get to sit down with a boss. So now, who's there is Balistreri, the boss, his underboss, his consigliere, and his 2 sons, who are both lawyers, right? So we have a big spread. We're eating. Why do you want to be here? Well, you know, Tony's been with us. Now, Lefty's doing all the talking because he's the made guy. Tony's been with us for 10 years. You know, him and Donnie, they did a lot of art theft together and stuff, and they've both been with us. And Tony thought he could get the business going with the machines and stuff. So after this whole dinner, probably about 5 or 6 hours, he said, okay, we'll get back to you. All right. So a couple of days later, they called, why don't you have dinner at my house? A fucking boss is inviting us to dinner at his house. It doesn't happen. If you know the world of the Mafia. Gives us the address, me, Lefty, and Tony. And Lefty's like, you got to know wise guys, right? Lefty's like, we're going to the dinner at a mob boss's house, at his house. He's like, I mean, we know it's a big deal, but to a wise guy, it's a big fucking deal too. So we go to his house, and he's right on the lake. He has a big table, like you see in the movies, and got the maids serving us. And he's okay. He said, we'll go in partners. We'll be 50-50 partners. Tony does all the work. We'll tell you where to go to put your machines in. They'll take your machines. So now, what did we just do? We just married 2 mafia families together, Bonannos and the Balistraris through Chicago. At first, marrying 2 mafia